Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from the hilltop. Welcome to today's webinar, Balancing Act, Managing Work and Family While Working Remote, sponsored by Georgetown McDonough's Office of Alumni Relations and the MBA Advisory Council's Committee on Creating Equality. We're so glad to have you join us. Thanks for taking time out of your workdays to connect virtually with us. My name is Lauren Apicella, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations for Georgetown McDonough, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to share a few tips and reminders. This webinar broadcast is being recorded. The recording of this webinar will be made available on our alumni events page, as well as the Georgetown McDonough YouTube channel within 5 business days. You will receive the link to the recording in a follow-up email, which will also contain a post-webinar survey for you to take, information on upcoming webinars, and more ways to stay connected with Georgetown McDonough. We are working on to offer more opportunities for alumni to engage with us online, so please do keep checking our website as it is updated frequently. Our panelists will take questions throughout the webinar. Please send in your questions as you have them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please submit those concerns to me via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Today's webinar is moderated by Allison Davis, MBA Class of 2000, and the President of the MBA Alumni Advisory Council. Allison is a senior banker at the JP Morgan Private Bank and is working from home with their 9-year-old daughter. We also have Jenna Balkus joining us today, MBA Class of 2015, who is a director at American Express and is working from a cozy apartment in Brooklyn with her newly crawling 9-month-old son and husband. And last but not least, we are joined by Lisa Mayer, MBA Class of 1998, who is also on the Mac and is working from home with her husband, teenage son and daughter, and 2 noisy dogs. Unfortunately, our 2 other panelists today, Sylvia Vetia-Smith and Elle Madras, were unable to make it because that's the life of a teleworking mother and employee. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn things over to Allison for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you especially to Lisa and to Jenna for joining me today. We're sorry to miss Elle and Sylvia, but I think we've got some interesting things to chat about. I think it might be helpful, Lisa and Jenna. Whoop, that's one of the other things. Hold on. We lost me because somebody called. It might be helpful, Lisa and Jenna, if you could just kick off. And this is going to get to be problematic. If you could just start off with a little bit about you and how your personal situation has changed on the back of everything that has happened in the last couple of months. Jenna, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this panel with Allison and Lisa. So a little bit about myself. So as Lauren mentioned at the beginning of the opening statement, I do have a young son who's 9 months old. I had actually just returned to work in mid-February, back to the American Express office in New York, and had only been back to work for a few weeks before we were sent home again. So I think that's a little bit of a unique situation because I was kind of rebuilding my network and getting back into the swing of things only to be sent home. So that's been a bit of an adjustment, and I'll be happy to talk about that today.
Awesome, thanks. How about you, Lisa?
I want to share a very personal situation that occurred for me. So right when COVID started, I was CFO of a large publicly traded technology company called MicroStrategy. It was the end of February. It was leap year day, actually. And my husband, who has been in great health his whole life, and as well as I have, had a stroke, which now, of course, we don't know if it was COVID related or not. So that was incident number one. Everybody's fine. He's 100% recovered miraculously. Everything was great, but that was a scare. Then about that time, I realized I wanted to leave MicroStrategy jobs. And then the following week, my daughter got sent home from Boston University after her freshman year. And so it has been a crazy time for me. And I'm somebody who I feel so fortunate my whole life. I've always been, had great health, great career options. And, I'm on a brand new world, and it's been fine. It's been a hard adjustment. And, but now I'm getting in the groove and figuring out how to interview with dogs barking on my Zoom, and, spending all day Zooming and cooking and cleaning and doing things that I never thought I would do. So it's been a fun transition for me. I'm still really active with Georgetown, and I'm so happy to be here today to talk to people, as I know everybody's going through their own struggles. So it's a great opportunity to chat with you all.
Yeah, well, and it's great. We've all got sort of some similarities, but still very different aspects of what's happened. And so as Lauren mentioned, I'm at home with my 9-year-old daughter. I'm a banker, and so most of my job was always getting out there and meeting people and shaking hands. There were a lot of late nights that have definitely gone away. It's really changed the tenor of what I do, but it's also made me a little bit of a third grade teacher, which I never quite expected was going to come down the pike. So, I guess you touched on this, both of you, but what do you think has been the biggest challenge that you faced since these changes have come into play, and how have you dealt with that, overcome it, are still working to overcome it? Sort of what's the biggest piece of that? And Jenna, why don't we start with you again?
Yeah, so, I think the biggest challenge for me has been knowing when to end my workday, and being deliberate about that. And I can be honest, I'm still working on that. One nice thing is that my young son does have a set bedtime, more or less around the same hour time frame every night. So my leader knows that I need to at least go to bedtime, and maybe I'll have to pop back on. But more often than not, I'm popping back on. And so it's finding that balance of, making sure I'm not doing that every night, and having that space where I can be my old self and have a glimmers of my old life. I think coming back after mat leave, my Amex offers 6 months of mat leave. So I was out for 6 months. And I think that, it takes a while to get back into the flow of things. And there's a level of wanting to prove yourself when you come back too. And having to do that when you're online and away from your team and away from your leaders, I think adds, for me, a little extra pressure for that. So, I think I definitely felt that, and I think that's why my biggest challenge is finding that balance of work and home. Because I think, not having that delineation of space from your work, from your home, makes it all the more murky.
And so what are some of the things that you're trying, right? Whether they've I see personally, I feel like there's a new blog out every day about how to do XYZ while at home with COVID. And I can't process them all, but are there tips that you've found that have been helpful?
I honestly, it's just been speaking up for myself with my team and my leader and saying, these are the moments that I need to step away. And then also, being completely honest with my leader, even though we're in a crisis mode, and even though, our team is investor relations, a lot of investors are very interested in talking to our team as Amex goes through this crisis, but being mindful that we can't be in 24/7 crisis mode throughout this entirety of the situation, because we don't know how long it's going to last. And, people need that break and that respite. So advocating for that for myself and for my team, because no one else is going to do that other than yourself. So I think that's one thing that it's a constant dialogue with my team and with my leaders, and making sure kind of we're all taking breaks, because I think that's really important. So like I said, it's a work in progress. I think, you know, I would like to step away a little bit more than I have, but hopefully eventually I'll find that balance.
Sounds good. Lisa?
I would say I went through a 3-phase process when this all hit. First, you know, I was worried about my employees and my team, and making sure that everybody was not only physically, you know, safe from COVID, but emotionally stable. Letting people know it was okay to work from home, that we were all going to be productive, and really helping people. And I would have weekly team meetings and make sure everyone knew that, you know, I didn't expect them to be available 24/7. I wasn't judging them on their haircuts or their background noises, or their dogs barking. And that it was okay. You know, all of a sudden it became much more intimate on how you were working with your colleagues. You know, you were seeing parts of their lives that you had never before, and we had to get used to that. So first, you know, I was worrying about the teams. Then I started worrying a lot about my family. You know, like I said, I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, and just making sure from a mental health perspective that they were doing the right things. And you know, I was pretty hard on myself at first, you know, that my 16-year-old was playing too many video games and, you know, not spending enough time in academics. I realized that he probably is not going to be a professional sniper, even though he plays way too much Call of Duty or whatever that so it was okay as long as, you know, I was giving him a break, but I also had to push him at the right times to do what was good for him. You know, and of course, you know, the husband or the partner is always the last one. You worry about it first, the kids and the partner. So I spent time, you know, making sure that my husband was okay too. So worrying about them. And then all of a sudden, after worrying about my employees and my family, I started thinking about me, and I realized I am just exhausted. I'm sitting here all day. First of all, looking at myself, looking at my roots coming in, and you know, whatever it may be, sitting on the screen, judging yourself, and not taking the appropriate breaks that you needed to, you know, to not be looking at yourself, to go out and get some fresh air, and it may be raining, or exercise, whatever it may be. So I think those were a couple stages I've gone through. Now I'm trying to make sure I make time for 2 active breaks. I set up a little bit of a routine. My daughter and I always go walk the dogs at 5:30. So I make sure if I have a call from 5:30 to 6:30, that's my sacred time. Make sure I get up and exercise. It's funny, I don't now start meetings till 9:30 typically, because that gives me time to exercise, get through my emails, do a little bit of meditation. I love meditation, and I use an app, Headspace, whatever you want to use. One of my favorite books I'll recommend to the audience is a book by Dan Harris called 10% Happier. And I think now more than ever, it's a time when you can sit and reflect on quiet time and some mental space. So those are the things I'm working on. I am nowhere near at any perfection on it. That's what's going on for me.
Yeah, no, and I think it's absolutely true. One, finding time for yourself. It's always been difficult, and somehow when you're at home, which is where you used to think, like, if I just had more time at home, I could find more time for myself. And I think we now have all the time at home, and we're realizing that wasn't the issue. It wasn't where we were. It was, you know, it was sort of how we prioritized things. And I think that's super important for people to think about, especially in these times. You know, and I echo your thoughts around screen time versus school. And I think, you know, as I mentioned, being a 3rd grade teacher they are amazing. And I don't know how they do it, because after 2 days, I think we were ready to kill each other, but we found a nice balance. And I finally had to realize that, you know, screen time, as much as I didn't like how much she was on the iPad, it's how she communicates with her friends right now. It's the only way she can play with friends, which, you know, is difficult, but like, you don't want to keep her away from that. And I also realized that the 8 hours she was in school, as much as they were giving her all of these things to do, even if she had been sitting in school during those 8 hours, she probably wasn't taking in every single thing that they were telling her during that time. And so I had to recognize that, like, just because they sent home this work didn't mean she suddenly at 9 had to have it learned by the end of the day. And that was, you know, that was sort of giving myself a little bit of a break as well, in terms of, you know, what was supposed to be accomplished every day. And I think that for me was probably the biggest challenge, was being able to say, okay, this doesn't have to be accomplished today. She will make it to 4th grade. She will make it to college. And if she doesn't happen to know her 3's times tables today, we're okay. And that's, you know, that's been tough, but we've gotten there over time. You know, as we've talked about, right, I think this is going to be an interesting time in terms of how it changes the way we work, right? I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that this is a bit of a watershed moment in terms of how people look at people working remotely. And I think as a working mother, this was something that I always struggled with, was there were days that I needed to work from home, or there were times that I needed to take something from a call so that I could be at a school event, or so that I could be at a doctor's appointment, or whatever it was. And I think a lot of times you sort of got sideways glances. Oh, you're working from home. Well, you're not really working. You're not really as productive as you would be if you were here. And I think what this has shown us is that in some ways people can almost be more productive. They're spending more hours working because they don't have to commute on either side of it. And while there are still jobs that require you to be in the office, I think that the way managers and management and companies look at how people work is going to change a lot. And so, you know, we've touched on some of them, but as you think about if your company said, look, you can work from home 4 days a week and you only have to be in the office 1 day a week, right? And that was sort of how that, or you can work from home the whole time. What are some of those tips, especially as we think about people that are on this call that might be starting their first job or transitioning to a new job that's going to allow them to do that? What are some of those key things that you would encourage them to take away and implement as they're starting that process? Lisa, do you want to?
I think I've spent a lot of time looking at what there's a lot of material out there about what the new workplace is going to look like. And there's one, Cushman Wakefield has a overview of the 6-foot office. So the reality, you know, so if you have to share elevators or spaces, offices, at least for now, are not going to be able to accommodate everybody going back to work together. So that's for sure. And secondly, a lot of the studies show that working from home, for most people, it maxes out about 16 hours in terms of the level of happiness. 16 hours a week, people like to work from home. After that, they need socialization. And by the way, if you live at home by yourself or with small children, that may vary. So I do think I'm trying to visualize what it's going to look like in a few months from now when a lot of this shelter-in-place rules are gone. And I'm thinking that people are certainly going to be in the workplace a couple days a week and be at home a few days a week. I also think business travel is going to be dead for a very long time. Particularly, you know, there's no way I'm going to be going to New York or San Francisco for a 1 hour meeting like I used to be. I think now we realize that we can be much more effective and just as much, if not more, connected with folks on a video screen. So I think that's those are all some transitions that are going on externally. I think for us, what as you know, working mothers in particular, or you know, with family around, I think what changes here is compartmentalizing. What we need to do is compartmentalize more. So, for example, you know, I'll be working, and then all of a sudden I'll realize, hey, my son hasn't eaten today, or you know, or you know, worried about his homework. And so, you know, if I'm at the office all day, I don't necessarily think about that until I get home. And so I do think we have to balance that a little bit more as we go back to, if we're going to be home a few days a week, and make sure we're compartmentalizing that time so we could be focused at work and then focused at home.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
The only thing I'd add is, yeah, I think what Lisa said is spot on. You know, you need to create that space for yourself, not only physical space, but that space in your day to do the things that you would be doing if you were physically going to an office. So, I mean, I think, Lisa, you have this routine already. I'm starting it again. I started it, stopped it, started it, but like getting up, working out, maybe going for a quick walk in the morning or in the evening. You know, the things, that mental space that I would have had on the commute both going to the work and coming home isn't there anymore. So how do I create it for myself? I think that's one key thing to consider as you're thinking about working from home. I think communication in a work from home environment is key. Having, whether it be through your internal chat systems or video or phone calls, what have you, but that is going to be a key skill that is going to be needed to be effective in these work from home environments. And so learning how best to communicate with in the workplace. I think, we all communicate differently. And so recognizing kind of your style, and then making sure the people you work with know what your style is so that they can effectively communicate with you as well. So I think it's, we've realized it works. Definitely that's something I keep hearing within American Express is like, this is working. We're actually being very productive, and we're actually making decisions maybe faster than before, which is great. And so I think, as we start to realize how productive and how effective people can be in different locations, it will definitely change kind of the work environment that we knew in 2019. And I think it'll be a different work environment when we come out of this.
Yeah, I think as long as we don't all burn out, right? Like that's the hard part. So we've got a couple questions here from the audience. So the first one is, aside from managing your family and home life, what advice do you have for those who want to continue to show ambition at work, i.e. volunteer for high priority projects, mentoring, etc.? Jenna, you touched on this a little bit and your sort of return from maternity leave. Are there things that you have found that have been more productive or more helpful than others, or other suggestions you'd have?
Yeah, I think this is a time to also look at your professional development. I was actually sitting with a group of women kind of on a Zoom call among my colleagues at Amex, and we were talking about, we should not, Amex is a big networking culture, and we have a rotational culture in that you rotate your role kind of every 18 to 24 months. Well, that's kind of put on hold in the current environment, but when we come out of this, a lot of people will be ready to kind of rotate to their next role within the company. And so we were talking about, well, who's networking right now? And, I think people kind of had that aha moment, like, we can still be networking even if it's not going for coffee. You can set up a Zoom or Skype call and you still have that interaction. So I think, that's one thing you can do, is just making sure you're kind of sticking to those professional development goals for yourself. And, I think a lot of companies, I think I've been hearing LinkedIn as well, is doing a lot of kind of online training. And so anything you can do to like upskill yourself in this current environment, I think will only better position you, for the next opportunity or future opportunities down the road.
Jenna said something earlier that reminded me about styles as well. So I work in technology and finance, and there's a lot of introverts, and being an introvert in this environment is really hard. So I think there's two aspects. If you, as a manager, I think it's important that we pull everybody together. I think sometimes the people, and it relates to the question, because the people that are volunteering or organizing the office happy hours, virtual happy hours, for example, are going to get that face time. But as a manager, and just as somebody who cares about professional development of your employees or your peers, I think it's important to draw those people out in different ways. And, they're always the ones that don't want to put their camera on, or who, just step back a little and don't participate in the calls. So I think, like in some of my calls, I'll usually ask somebody, hey, what do you think about this situation? And make sure we're drawing those folks out and helping them develop their careers. And then as far as the question, which I thought was a really good one, how can you continue to develop? I agree. Everything Jenna said is, take advantage of this time to do some professional development, assess your skill set. I'm always saying this, but even more so now that you have a little bit of time, look at your skill set. What are you missing for what you want to be in 5 years? In finance, for example, I'm always asking people, okay, what are you missing in your CFO skill set? Do you know how to do taxes? Do you know how to do treasury? what are the things that are missing, and then let's set a plan to accomplish, to fill out that skill set so that you can get to the next level. And then I do think things like volunteering to coordinate, or to make this more cheerful time for folks, or share interesting information on how to navigate. So for example, I had one employee that was really good at organizing a trivia game on a Friday night for the team, or just sharing information around, what the new workplace is going to look like. Not being a downer, but certainly, providing information that's useful to folks. So those are some of my suggestions. Very good question.
Yeah, and I think just making your manager know that you want to take on more responsibility, right? And that you're looking for ways to step up at this point in time is a good way to make sure that they're thinking about you as they're delving out projects and things like that. The next question from the audience is, what can employers do to help support employees working remotely, but also looking after kids? How much responsibility do they have to help their employees with kids? Which I think this is super hard, because there are people, and there are people that I manage who are at home, they're single parents and they have kids, and there's nowhere for them to send them. And there's no way for them to not, with a 2 and a 4-year-old, to not have to pick them up and feed them and help them throughout the day. And so, I think it's an absolutely important question. And I don't know, Lisa, do you want to kick off with that one?
Sure. I think the world's changed so much. I had a accountant that was very talented, and she moved to North Carolina about 4 months ago. And then, in January, every time we get on a conference call, her dog was barking, and I was so annoyed. I was like, this remote thing does not work at all, and that was before everybody's mindset has changed. So that was just the dog. But then I had one of my head of internal audit. She had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. We'd be on conference calls. And I realized, first of all, not only do we all have to give folks with kids breaks, just in terms of, probably not being their most buttoned up self on the camera at the time, but also I actually am incredibly more impressed with the people that can balance that out. So I don't think there's an answer yet. I think we have to solve that problem, particularly, once even virtual schooling is out for folks, and they're going to have to figure out what to do with their summers. One of the things I tried to do was balance workload and meeting schedules to make sure I'm accommodating folks, and particularly, one of the things other environments may be the same is you get over meetings. You don't need a meeting on everything, right? So can we reduce the meetings so that people can do the work in their own time after they get their kids to bed? Which, it's sad that we have to ask people to do that, but in this environment we probably do. So how can we be more sensitive to, not having as many meetings as we normally did, and a little bit less FaceTime?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is, the number of meetings, yes, but also does everyone have to be on video all the time? Because maybe that person can be on mute listening to the call and walking around and helping with their kids. So I think, providing that level of flexibility too. I go back to my hallmark point at the beginning. I think this is when it's key to be able to communicate and voice what you need, because you have to just, especially if you're home at kids, you have to let your team and this is something you're going through and you're struggling, and what is it that you need out of the situation to make you a more effective colleague. I think it's just going back to having those open dialogues. I think it's super important, and it's really helped kind of me create that space for myself and understand kind of what my kind of parameters are in the situation.
Well, and so this next question, I think, falls to the other side of the whole, how do we get what we need and communicate about what we need? It's, that so much falls on moms, no matter how much they say the world is changing. I love working from home, but not with my kids hovering around me looking for food and attention. They're 11 and 17 from this questioner. We can only compartmentalize so much when we were all in the home. How do you engage the rest of the family in taking responsibility for helping to make this work?
I love that question. I struggled with that when I was first home. because we've had cleaning help, and generally ordered out way too much food. And so all of a sudden, there was a lot of things to do in the house, and we have pets, and it's, dirty, and people are running, and people leave their stuff everywhere. So it was such a great question. So one of the things we did is we made a list of chores, and I said, everybody pick two, and they have to do that every week. And the kids know, and they're, like I said, there was some grumbling. It was not perfect, but they're doing it, and they try and weasel their way out of it. But generally speaking, people I've just been really clear, like, I can't do it all. And, and my son, his first month of quarantine didn't do any laundry at all. And, and I didn't either. And so I don't know what happened. Eventually it got done. So I think that's a really hard question. And these are I can make a list of the 6 or 7 unintended benefits of all of this. Certainly, I'm sure everybody's saying it is dinner time together as a family, has been a wonderful blessing. Certainly my kids learning independence. I think learning a little bit about hardship. My son is trying to play college athletics, and this is a whole new world, and he may get cut from a team when he hasn't even had a tryout, and he's balancing all that, and but he's led a very privileged life till now. So I think it's a good life lesson for them. Get them to help out with things, learn that we're still also lucky that we're healthy, that we have we have food on the table, we have a comfortable home, and just reminding everybody how lucky they are without being that annoying Charlie Brown mother in the background, I think, is the challenge.
Yeah.
I am extremely fortunate that my husband is still on pat leave. So although there are moments when I have to step away and help out, for the most part, the burden has fallen on him. And so we both work for companies that have very family-friendly policies, so very fortunate in that respect. That will be ending in August, so talk to me in August and I'll tell you how I am.
We'll come back and ask the question, yes. Well, and look, I'm a single mother. I am lucky to have an au pair that stayed. And so she lives in the house with us, and she has been quarantining with us. And I still get called upon to be the mom and to do things in the middle of the day and things like that. But I very much appreciate having that help. And I don't really know how this would work. If it was just me and my daughter. I'm sure we'd find a way to do it, because everybody always finds a way to work through whatever situation they are in. But that piece has been a godsend. I know a lot of au pairs went home when all of this stuff started to happen. And so I also know there are a lot of families out there that don't sort of have that help that they used to have. And that changes things dramatically too. I think it's, to Lisa's point, it's divvying up the responsibilities and making sure that people are clear on how there's more of them than there used to be.
And I wanted to add one more thing is I also think a little bit of it is lowering your expectations. Whether, we hadn't ordered out any food for a long time. And then finally we said, okay, we're going to order in here and there. And, I joke around that I have decided to make carbs great again, because I personally was trying to diet all the time and make sure I was eating super healthy, and, goodness forbid I ate bread or pasta. Well, I'm over that. I think just setting our expectations a little bit lower in this situation is whether it be, once again, on the kids' schooling, on yourself, on the home front, so if the house is a little dirtier than usual, by the way, you're not having guests over, so who cares, right? Stop looking at all the dirt and just go read a book out in the yard instead if you're getting too worked up about it. So I think a little bit of it is also just setting new expectations, realizing at some point things will come back to where they were, and we'll and hopefully we can, I saw a question in chat, but hopefully we can take away all the good things that have come out of this and hold on to those.
Yeah. I was going to save that for the last one. I wanted to end on a positive note. We'll get
Be kind to yourself.
So I think there's another one here about, there have been articles about the COVID telework space that have said many people actually work more from home. Has this been your experience? Do you find that this might disproportionately impact women with families working from home? And how have employers responded to this situation? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, right? At least from my perspective, because this is a crisis. So like a lot of companies are actually kind of in crisis mode and figuring out how they adapt in the current environment. So naturally, I feel very fortunate to have a lot of work to do. That being said, I have a lot of work to do. And so I don't know if that's just because of the current, I have to imagine some of that's because of the current environment. When things start to slow down, and, I think that you're already seeing that, like we're already kind of understanding this is going to be a longer term thing. And so how do we manage and how do we kind of create that space in terms of like, this is our work day and this is what it looks like. I think, I think it's definitely something that needs to be factored in terms of creating that work from home day. Because as we come into a more of a BAU environment, I do think like if people are juggling kids during the day, inevitably there's probably gonna be work to do at night. And so it's a tough balance for sure.
Yeah, I would say, so the question I think was, are people more productive from home, and has this disproportionately affected mothers, particularly working from home? Well, first of all, this sounds very like a large generalization, but I would say typically working mothers are more productive anyway. We have so much to do. We don't have time. And so I'd say, we're very productive. I think I've seen it across the board. I think people that are more productive working from home typically also take time to do their work, right? So I just see this in general is there's 3 activities during the day. There's, reading, thinking, planning time. There's the hamster wheel of the emails, and then there's meeting time. And I think you got to make sure that and I think the most effective and productive people, whether it be working mothers or anyone else, make sure they take that chunk of time that they need for the thinking, the real working time. And so that's, I think folks are more productive if they carve out that time. But certainly and you probably have a little bit more of it now because you're not commuting. And for some people, actually, some of their thinking and creative time was during their commute. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But I think if you can take that time to make sure that you're carving out, and like I said, I don't start meetings till 9:30 because that way I have that first hour in the day, every day, that I'm actually, spending time thinking about, okay, what are the strategic things I need to get done? And I think that's the way to be even more productive. But generally speaking, yes, I think people are more productive. And but the question is, how do they not burn themselves out?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. And I think that companies are also starting to learn the difference between productivity and like working time, right? And so how do we make sure that we're driving productivity as opposed to just time in the seat or time at work, and making sure, and I think, as is usually the case, crises make us do that faster than we might otherwise want to do. And I think we've seen this crisis really accelerate how people think about those things, especially when you have to juggle all of the new things that we have to juggle because we're not sitting in the office. You think about productivity very differently, and that I need to get all of this stuff done. And if I can get it done quickly and well, then I can move to the other things that I have to get done. And so, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to play out and how we keep people from burning out, because they are trying to do basically 2 full jobs and do each of them in a shorter amount of time so they can get them into the 24-hour day. There is a question here about families with special needs children, responsibilities being double, and the burden for caregivers is considerably more. And I agree. I don't have any personal experience with that. My inclination would be to talk to the employer about it, because I think that's going to be the most important, is sort of how they can help you, can give you the time and the ability to sort of manage those things. I don't know, Lisa, Jenna, do you have any other thoughts or tips?
Yeah, I think what you said is, certainly people need to be more transparent about it. So I have a lot of friends that their kids have special educational needs. And I think it's been super hard for them to deal with that remotely. And so I think just being really open and transparent about it to people you work with is helps people be more helpful to you.
And then I will, before I take Prashant's question, I'm going to ask the positive one, which is, we all now have some experience from working at home. What are some of the positives that you're taking away from this experience, and what are some of those that you'd like to continue after the pandemic is over? I don't know that over is ever going to be the right word, but after we've returned to the new normal.
There will be an end. Positive.
Okay, there we go. I like that.
I mean, for me, it's one of the big positives. Is, like I said, I was only back to work for about a month. So I was very used to being at home with my son every day. So being able to kind of go back to that and see him for more hours during the day, especially as he goes through some of these big developmental leaps, like starting to crawl, has been just a major upside to this whole thing. I think one of the positive things is letting go, Lisa, like you alluded to. I am someone who keeps a pretty tidy place. I like to think that I typically do, and I have really let that go. And I think I think it's okay, and I think just kind of like there are certain things that you can control, and then there's certain things you kind of have to let go for your own sanity. And I think that's been a surprising positive to me, because before I would have been letting the clutter get to me.
Yeah, for me, it's I'd like to, I've reflected back on the hamster wheel, once again, analogy of my life that was, lots of meetings, lots of networking, lots of evening events. Allison, I know you'd appreciate that. Every networking or cocktail event I had to go to and be present and meet with people. I think I need to be more selective when things change, and take more time for me, for my family, because I really appreciate it. And I don't have much time left. I mean, I only have one more at home, so I got to make sure I enjoy that. And then, by the way, I did not know there was so much good, juicy television. My son and I have been watching American Idol, The Voice, Baker and the Beauty. I mean, these amazing television that I didn't even know existed. And of course, I'm being sarcastic because it's terrible, but it's really fun that we get to sit and watch it as a family. And, something I never would have done when we had to run the soccer practice and the networking engagement and all that. So I don't think I'll continue watching The Voice as much after this is all over. But I do think, just spending time doing silly stuff is good for you, and you forget about that sometimes.
Yeah. No, I have to say, I've appreciated the extra time I've had with my daughter, and the ability at like 2 p.m, if it's a nice day, to get outside and go for a walk with her, or like bounce a tennis ball around if it happens to work with the schedule. And so, finding more of those times to carve out going forward, I think, is going to be super important. And I had a second one, but I forgot what it was. So I'm sure I'll remember at some point. But Prashant has asked us, he says, thanks for taking the time to join this panel. And I say thank you to you ladies as well for joining me. But he's asking, how can men be better allies at this time, but also moving forward? And I have a few ideas, but I'm going to let you guys go first.
I think one way, I work with a team of mostly women, but I think, one thing is just keeping kind of that dialogue open. I do manage someone who is at home with his family, and just, checking in and making sure they're okay. And he's, he's doing the same for me. And so I think, you know, having that two-way street of just checking in on the kind of like, in terms of a colleague perspective, making sure all your colleagues are doing well, if female or male. You know, I think this, for my husband and I, this has been a moment where my husband has really stepped up, because I'm experiencing the going back to work thing and in kind of a virtual environment and finding that balance. So I think there will be a time when he's going back to work in August where I'll have to step in more too. And so I think, you know, finding that balance and finding those areas where understanding that like him doing more now is not going to be forever. But so that's been helpful. So, and to the extent that at home others can do that too, I think that's great.
So from a personal perspective, my husband has always, you know, been a great partner in everything. So, you know, just continue to keep that up. I think from the work perspective, it's interesting now, because certainly if you think about men dealing with working moms, you know, just like working moms dealing with other working moms, we have to be empathetic and understand everything that's going on. One interesting thing that I realized I have to be more empathetic on is if I am working with men who have, you know, I'll call it stay-at-home moms, and so I have this one guy I was working with, and his wife was home with their 3 children all day, every day. And so, you know, now the kids aren't in school. She's got a 2, 4, and a 6-year-old at home, no help. And she is completely burnt out. And so, you know, he's trying to take some time to help her. And I'm realizing I have to be a better ally to him and give him more time to help out with the family, you know, normally. So I think in this particular time, it's just, you know, people being allies to each other in so many different ways that we never would have thought of. And it makes us all more empathetic and understanding, more vulnerable as well.
Yeah, I think it's so true, because I think it is, you know, it's everybody recognizing that everybody's situation is a little bit different and is going to require, you know, different ways of handling it and navigating it. And I think, you know, I think it's recognizing that everyone is doing the absolute best that they can, and giving people a little slack and giving yourself a little slack. You know, everybody is doing the best that they can. And some days that, at least from my perspective, for me, sometimes it doesn't feel like a very good best, but I know that it's the best that I can do in that moment. And I think recognizing that everybody else is doing the same thing provides you, to Lisa's point, with that empathy. You know, so I think that is great. I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else, Jenna or Lisa, that you'd like to comment on, or anything that you think that we've missed?
I think we covered it.
So pretty.
Oh, how to impress employers remotely, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can we can do that again. You know, I think we talked about how to like step up and you know, and make it known that that you know that you want to take more on, that you're ready for bigger challenges, you know, and things like that. I don't know, Jenna, Lisa, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I was going to just say, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so I'll be very tactical about Zoom skills, which I'm probably not the best at right now. So I do think everybody should continue to, you know, look at the online things about how to best present yourself in Zoom. You know, so try to be as buttoned up as you can to the extent you can. And, you know, we were joking before the call started about power posing. And I know many of you are familiar with this, you know, stand with your hands on your hips, your arms up in the air, you know, just do it a few times a day before you have meetings, just to remind you, give yourself some confidence, because you're not getting that pat on the back in the workplace. You know, you're at the, you know, proverbial water cooler and people are telling you, you know, what a great job you did in that meeting or anything like that. You're not hearing that anymore. So you got to hype yourself up. So that would be my recommendation. And I think it'll show when you're presenting on screen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think just creating those spaces, at least you mentioned the water cooler spaces, you know, a lot is actually lost when we don't create those spaces for kind of that casual dialogue that you can learn a lot about a person. So I think, you know, making sure you kind of create spaces for kind of that relationship building with people at the workplace too, I think goes a long way. I have a couple new team members, and so making sure kind of you get that in is just as important. I think understanding people on a personal and professional level, and that's kind of where you learn about them and what they're kind of going through in this environment. So and just being present, you know, I think you know, when you're on these Zoom calls, it's very easy to kind of do something else, multitask. Our computers are in front of us, but in a real present meeting in the office, you wouldn't have maybe your computer in front of you to distract you. So I think, you know, just making sure you're present in these meetings, just as you would be in person, is also important.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Lauren, I know you had some wrap-up comments that you wanted to say. I'll just say it was a pleasure speaking with both of you, Jenna and Lisa, today. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
I will turn it back to Lauren to wrap it up.
Thank you, Allison, for moderating, and thank you, Jenna and Lisa, for participating today. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us for today's webinar. This has been really great and informative. Just as a reminder, this recording will be made available on both our website as well as our YouTube channel within a few business days. You'll receive a link to the webinar recording and a follow-up email, along with a survey for you to take, information on upcoming virtual events, and then more ways to stay connected with Georgetown McDonough. We are working to offer more opportunities for our alumni to engage online with us, so please keep checking our website for more information. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.